What's up, guys? So I figured we would probably go ahead and finish up that Hunter Avallone episode. His episode was pretty long, so we definitely needed to go ahead and make sure that we finished it up, especially since there could be some context in there that I was missing. So let's continue. This video was brought to you by the wonderful people on screen here who support me over at Patreon. If you want to support this channel and what I do, then please check the link in the description or the link at the end of the video. Alrighty, fan art and then video. First we have a serious-looking Suris from Lanfiket, and I hope I didn't mispronounce that. Then we have a chiseled Suris from Moonlight Cactus, and finally some nightmare fuel from Zach FR. As usual, thank you guys for your submissions, and let's get right into the rest of Hunter's video.
So we are left with the understanding that fetuses are, yes, part of the human family, and their rights, according to the provisions laid out by the UN, should be fully recognized. There is a genocide of the unborn going on, which is scarily similar to Hitler's eradication of the Jews.
That's about where we left off last time. In the last video, if you guys don't remember, Hunter and his fiancée attempted to compare people who have abortions to Nazis committing genocide. I didn't make any comments on Godwin's law since I don't think that immediately makes you lose an argument, but I would like to restate my case from the last video that this is a very false equivocation. And now that we're caught up on that, let's continue.
But it's decried as not only okay, but empowering just because the oppressed people group cannot fight back.
You know, it's not empowering because there's an oppressed people group that can't fight back. It's empowering because a woman actually has the rights to her own body. In the last video, you seemed to harp a lot on the human rights issue, and there was one thing that I didn't bring up, and that was the concept of extra rights. You can have equal rights between a fetus and a person. Just call the fetus a person, and then all humans have equal rights. But if there's one thing that I didn't frame in that argument as well as I could, it's the fact that the fetus doesn't have the right to the woman's body. The woman allows the fetus to grow there and become a human being. Even if we were to grant full personhood, full rights, and everything to the fetus, it still does not gain the extra right of the woman's womb. That would be having equal rights plus one. It would be assigning special privilege to the fetus, which just giving an extra right isn't necessarily a problem in and of itself. It becomes a problem when that right comes at the expense of someone else, and in this case, it comes at the expense of the potential mother. This is the reason why my argument against this type of rhetoric grants full personhood to the fetus in all instances. I don't see a reason to grant the fetus the extra right of the woman's womb over and above the human rights you guys are laying out from the United Nations. And that's me granting that that even applies here.
Pro-choice advocates also love to pretend to be pro-woman to somehow validate their support for the slaughter of the unborn. However, abortion can result in significant harm to the mother as well. A 2011 study published in the British Journal of Psychiatry found that women who had an abortion are 34% more likely to develop anxiety, 37% more likely to experience depression, 110% more likely to abuse alcohol, and 155% more likely to commit suicide.
Yes, and while those are wonderful statistics and numbers, do you happen to know the reason behind all of those? Because from my perspective, I can go ahead and guess a few. Although, for one, Hunter, my dude, I would love if whenever you cite your studies, you would put them in your freaking description so that people could read them as well. I have no idea how many of your fans I've gotten in my comment section that come to the bat for you saying that you cite studies and statistics, and they're not technically wrong. But what they seem to not understand is that they're taking all of your arguments on face value from those sources, and you, on the other hand, aren't actually linking those sources for them to check themselves. Your audience is committing a giant genetic fallacy by looking at you as the source of claims and determining that truth value based on the way you're articulating things. But that's all tangential. Let's actually address your point here. So, when you point out that somebody is more likely to do something, you need to go ahead and establish your base values, something that you failed to do. Let me explain why this perspective is necessary. If you have a 1% chance of something bad happening, and then a study is done on the chance that you would have had that bad thing happen to you, and it determines that, as per the study, you had a 100% more likely chance of having the bad thing happen to you than was originally projected. That sounds incredibly horrible. That's a huge number. That's a giant increase. Except in reality, the chances of the bad thing happening to you went from 1% to 2%. So for instance, if there was a 10% chance that a woman would develop anxiety through a regular birthing process, A 30% increase would end up meaning that they had about a 13% chance of added anxiety. So these numbers aren't actually as giant as you think they are, and your audience, I'm guessing, is buying a hook, line, and sinker. This is the importance of linking those studies. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the other issue. An accurate representation of numbers is one thing, but there's also the issue of perspective. Let's talk about the committing suicide statistic and the alcoholism statistic. Heck, we could actually bring in the anxiety statistic as well. The numbers don't necessarily matter. As long as they're larger than the original values, that's all that we need for the argument. So your argument from these studies is that if a woman has an abortion, she has an increased chance of getting anxiety, or falling into alcoholism, or committing suicide. And what you seem to not be considering, and definitely not articulating to your audience, is that you are one of the reasons why that happens. Let me explain. When you explain to your audience that they shouldn't do X thing, and your audience then takes that and uses that information to deliberate that to other people, the chance that some random person is going to hear that they shouldn't do X thing significantly increases. When you argue from a position that it is always wrong, you give that argument to your audience, and when you give that argument to your audience, that's the argument that they will parrot and articulate to other people in their deliberation. Your argument isn't just that it's intellectually wrong, but it's morally wrong. So, let me paint a scenario for you with this information. A woman has to have an abortion for an elected reason. I've been informed by more people since making my video that they had to have abortions for survival and they still were classified as elective reasons. I could point to any one of them as my reasoning for this scenario, but I can go ahead and just use a hypothetical person here. This person has an elective reason for getting an abortion. They receive the abortion. Afterwards, their family blames and shames them repeatedly for having to do so. Even some of their close friends end up doing the same thing. Many of these friends might actually be fans of yours. You have a pretty large audience. This is why in previous videos, I've made a point to tell you to be responsible with your platform. These people parroting these views, and I'm not trying to say they're all coming from you, I'm just saying you're part of the problem, can end up leading this person to being anxious. So much so that they actually develop chronic anxiety. It wasn't the abortion that caused this, it was everybody's reaction to the abortion. A negative reaction that you yourself are attempting to foster. This hypothetical person also ends up turning to alcohol to cope, because when you numb the pain, you numb the anxiety. But the shaming never stops. The prodding never stops. And thus, the pain never stops. And ultimately, it culminates in suicide. Because this person, whether you think they should have or not, has been being called a child killer for multiple years of their life and has been doing everything in their power to cope with it. And because you are responsible for the rhetoric that you disseminate on your platform, you inevitably became a part of this vicious cycle. I don't think that this is your intent. I'm still thoroughly convinced that you're not a malicious actor here. I think that you think this is the right way forward. However, I also think that you're really fucking wrong. So, in closing from the arguments, I believe it is mostly societal factors that lead to those increases. As evidence, I'll just go ahead and point to the shifting Overton window in the country right now, as more and more anti-abortion laws get passed state by state. I also have a huge issue with the fact that you don't link your studies in your description for other people to look at, and because you don't give the baseline numbers for the chances of anxiety, alcoholism, etc., the increased change has no actual value, but because the numbers are big and scary, it sounds like they have value.
Whenever abortion is brought up, pro-choice activists are quick to bring up the most extreme circumstances, such as rape or incest. It's important to note, rape only makes up 0.3% of reasons for abortion.
Yes, and rape is not always documented, and if you think it is, as I said in the last episode, you are severely deluding yourself. Also, I love how the elective reason breakdown in there, for some reason, doesn't include the reasons that my partner and others that have contacted me have had to deal with, but I would like to go ahead and laser focus on one of them. Since we had the chart up, you have on that chart that there's only 32% of these that happen because people are too young or immature. You yourself have also pointed out that you think that abortion is wrong in any and all circumstances. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop the bomb here that the youngest confirmed mother in history was Lena Gerardo. I hope that I was pronouncing that correctly. She gave birth at 5 years, 7 months, and 21 days old. Now, obviously, that is an extreme example, but if your statement, all abortion is wrong always, can't pass this, then it means that you can't pass the reductio ad absurdum. If your argument can't pass to the reductio, then it's a bad fucking argument, because it relies on special pleading, which, from what I understand, you're about to do.
But regardless of that percentage, abortion, even in the cases of rape or incest, is wrong.
Oh, no. You guys didn't go that route. You guys actually stuck to your guns, and you stayed consistent. Okay, that makes things so much easier. One of the arguments that I hear constantly from the pro-birth side, and from the people in your comment section, is that if you didn't want to get pregnant, use protection, and that somehow consent to sex is consent to pregnancy. While I believe that the statement that consent to sex is consent to pregnancy is patently absurd, consent to driving in a car isn't consent to a car crash, it would still follow that either way you take that statement, if you don't consent to sex, you don't consent to the pregnancy. So why should somebody have to deal with a pregnancy that they did not want? That they didn't consent to? In the case of rape, if they do not consent to the pregnancy and they have to carry it to term because of people like you, abusers, the people who raped, now have weapons that can be used against the now mothers. There are cases as early as last month where rape victims are having to fight for the right to keep their children over and above their rapist. There are states where rapists have won dual custody, meaning that the mother will have to see their assailant over and over again till the end of their lives, or at least until the child becomes 18, so about 20 more years of abuse on top of everything tragic that had already happened. By using your broad, generalized, stupid statement, you've opened yourself up to a perfect storm of nightmarish scenarios that you are helping to proliferate. And oh, by the way, I will be citing some articles where this has happened. You know, some light reading, so Hunter can educate himself from something that actually matters instead of the area between his two ass cheeks.
As we've already proven, abortion is taking the life of another human. And a human is a human no matter how it's conceived. There is certainly progress to be made. For example, it is disgusting that rapists can legally fight for custody in certain states.
So you already knew this, and you still made this point. You have lost all ability to gain the principle of charity with me.
But we don't need to take the tragedy of rape and add the tragedy of abortion.
But in your eyes, it is important to add the tragedy of forcing a mother to visit her rapist over and over again for up to 20 years. That's not a tragedy at all. That thing. That's not something that matters. At all. Honestly, I try not to insult. I try not to take people's looks and then use them as part of my argument. But truth be told, at this stage, the look that you guys have on your face in the freeze frame that I paused you on during editing is about what I feel goes on in your brains.
Two wrongs do not make a right.
People also justify abortion by bringing up scenarios where it may be necessary to save the life of the mother. This only makes up 0.1% of reasons for abortion, but this is the one and only time abortion is a viable option.
Except in the scenario that I gave in my last video, where it was considered an elective reason, in the category that you don't think it's okay for, but the pregnancy was still killing my partner. You still think that that's something that should have happened. I'm gonna go ahead and go out and say it. You're unironically arguing that my partner should be dead. This is not a straw man of your position. This is not a misrepresentation. This is the principle of entailment. And if you don't like the philosophical implications of your argument, get the fuck out of the arena.
No one should be required to sacrifice their life to save the life of another.
But there are other things, like having to visit their abusers, that they should have to sacrifice, right? That's an okay compromise. And you already know that's a compromise that has to be made in many cases, because you brought up the point yourself.
Anytime adoption is suggested as an alternative to abortion, pro-choice activists are quick to say that there aren't enough families waiting to adopt.
I'm fairly certain that that's actually not the way that that's worded most of the time, because I know that there are more families that say statistically that they want to adopt than there are people in the system. And yet, because of how bunk our adoption system is, they still end up not getting adopted, and many children end up growing up in the system alone. Why is that, Hunter? Are you going to bring that up? Or are you just going to throw out more data with absolutely no backing as to why it is the case?
Now, I agree there are complications with adoption. For example, it should certainly be made to be more affordable. But it is a flat-out lie that there are not enough families waiting to adopt. In fact, there are more hopeful adoptive parents than children currently in need of adoption.
Okay, so you're just going to throw a screenshot up from Google and then leave it at that. That's about what I figured. So let me go ahead and do that thing that you fail to fucking do every time. One such obstacle is that of multi-ethnicity. It wasn't until 1994 that the Multi-Ethnic Placement Act was made that says that no adoption agencies that receive any federal funding can delay or deny placement of an adoption based on race or ethnicity. This also only covers adoption agencies that are federally funded. There's also, over and above financial challenges involving health. health, because in many cases, you can't get the full health history of the child when you adopt. This can lead to further complications down the road. There are many situations where adopted children can't adjust to the families that they find themselves in, or vice versa. There are also adoption agencies that find themselves in an ethical quandary because in many cases, they actually violate the rights of the birth parents, or in some cases actually hide crucial background and health issues from the adoptive parents. But these are just some of the issues that can crop up during adoption. If you know more, please let me know in the comment section. Adoption is not a one-size-fits-all solution, nor is abortion. They both work in tandem.
Abortion advocates like to argue that a child may have a bad life, therefore abortion may be necessary. There are countless individuals who are born in destitute conditions who grew up to live happy and fulfilling lives. I know it might sound anecdotal, but as long as there's a small possibility that the child may grow up to live a happy and fulfilling life, it is not your call to make.
Sure, let me go ahead and use that logic against you real quick. Even though there is a small possibility that a woman will not have to deal with an abuser in the case of rape, which is a case that you brought up as one of your arguments, it does not fall on to you to decide what she gets to do with her body as a result.
The last common pro-choice argument is that abortion helps with overpopulation. Never mind the fact that this way of thinking actually motivated a good part of Hitler's racist ideology.
So we're just going to ignore the fact that abortions were actually performed within the camps in order to alleviate suffering of the mothers who in many cases were raped in those camps. Don't believe me? Look in the description. I've provided a link from the Holocaust Museum about the rapes and beatings that women had to suffer during the Holocaust, and another article about an Auschwitz doctor who saved countless lives through performing abortions within the camps. But I guess those pregnancies should have been carried to term as well, right? I'm sorry, but there isn't a comparison between pro-choice advocates and Hitler. This is the sloppiest way you can ever fall into Godwin's law.
For the sake of argument, we'll humor this overpopulation point. Overpopulation is a ridiculous attempt to try and justify abortion, and it is no different than claiming we should eradicate any other people group due to overpopulation.
Actually, there is a difference. A fetus has not experienced anything in its life. It provides no value in and of itself. An established person, however, can do that, and does do that. The eradication of a person is the eradication of thousands of lived experiences and a personality. The eradication of a fetus, on the other hand, is the nipping in the bud of potential. And I'm sorry, but I don't care about potential. The fetus has a chance of developing into a human and being a potential aid to the human race, or being a rapist, or a serial killer. So, sorry, the argument from potential means nothing to me. I would rather care about people's lived experiences. Except maybe when people try to weaponize them, like you.
Finally, and most importantly, earlier this year, a study conducted by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found that the fertility rate in the US has been falling for years, dipping so low that the nation's population would be declining without immigration. Once our baby girl was born, it quite literally changed everything. I quickly realized that my mentality before was disgustingly immature. I no longer wanted to run away. I wanted to run right towards my baby with arms open.
Awesome, but this argument from emotions doesn't do anything. Reals over feels, my friend.
This entire experience was extremely difficult for everyone. However, I think this helped me learn that although instant gratification might seem better in the moment, taking responsibility will lead to long-term fulfillment.
If you truly believed that, if you honestly took that lesson to heart, your channel in its current form wouldn't exist. Not every video of yours that I've watched, mind you, but many of them seem to be about how quick you can produce it and the instant gratification that comes from doing so. I can empathize since I have to produce episodes fairly quickly as well, but the long-term effects that radiate from your channel, I would argue, are overtly negative. If you truly cared about the long-term effects versus the instant gratification, then I don't know why you would have built your channel in the way that you have.
I recently read a quote, and I think it perfectly describes my feelings towards this entire situation. It says, "I'm so glad I didn't get what I thought I wanted."
The best things in life are sometimes the unexpected. And although our baby was a surprise, she's only filled us with more joy and motivation.
So if you or a friend are in a scary situation involving an unplanned pregnancy, choose life. It will be the best thing you've ever done.
No. If you are in a scary situation, choose the option that is best for you. That may or may not be the birth of that child. Your rhetoric is the rhetoric that enables abuse. The way you go about forming your argument for this particular point leads to the furthering of the cycle of abuse. And honestly, when I've done videos on you in the past, it seems like you just didn't argue your point very well, or didn't have all the information and jumped the gun. Here, it seems like, whether you intended to or not, your message is overly malicious. You're trying to throw numbers at a screen, hoping, and in many ways succeeding, to convince your audience that your position is the right one, when all you have to do is scratch a little below the surface of your arguments to find that they're nothing but fluff. Overt appeals to emotion, pretending that they're backed by data, and then trying to use yourself as an anecdote to live by when other people have anecdotes that undermine your position. It's sloppy, it's disgusting, and your video is harmful. But honestly, I know that you are willing to have these discussions with people. You've had discussions with Vegan Gains on this. You've had discussions with Jake from the Bible Reloaded, someone who graciously allowed me to come onto their stream during their 24-hour charity event. You've even debated against Vosh, a debate that was solidified during a stream that he and I were doing together. I'm not saying that you owe me a conversation. I'm not saying that that's what I want. What I am saying is that your message is overtly harmful, and I'm willing to back that up. And if you are up for a conversation on this issue, my doors are always open. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the video. I wish I could say that we're going to get into something fun for Friday, but I can't actually honestly give you that information. Friday we're going to be dealing with Steven Crowder and, well, tackling the whole Jessica Yaniv situation. Not a conversation that I wanted to get into, but, well, you'll see Friday. Anywho, as always everybody, if you enjoyed the video, please hit like, send it to a friend. YouTube's algorithm has been burying me lately, and I honestly wish it would stop, but what are you going to do? Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Insert end of video tagline here.